All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. We want to thank you for joining us today for WaterNow Alliance's webinar, Tapping into Climate Resilience, Health and Equity Benefits of Localized Green Stormwater Infrastructure. This is one in a series of interactive training webcasts that are part of WaterNow's Tap into Resilience initiative. My name is Lindsay Rogers, and I'm the Colorado Basin Program Manager here at WaterNow Alliance. Today, we're going to talk about the important role that green stormwater infrastructure plays in building climate resilient, healthy, and equitable communities. A recording of today's webinar will be available to you all on the Tap into Resilience resource library. I am joined today by Hannah Grooms, Senior Project Manager with Greenprint Partners, who manages green stormwater infrastructure projects that help communities improve their public health, climate change resiliency, and economies. And Dr. Georges Benjamin, Executive Director of the American Public Health Association, and a physician who is well known for his work in advancing preventative care and public health equity. We also have on the line today Caroline Cook, WaterNow's Policy Director and the creator of our Tap into Resilience Toolkit, and Jesse Bersinger, WaterNow's Database Manager, who's on hand to answer any of your questions throughout the webinar. Before we jump in, let's take a quick look at the agenda. First, I'll briefly provide an overview of WaterNow Alliance and the Tap into Resilience initiative. And then I'll turn it over to Caroline to walk us through how to use the TiR toolkit. Next, we'll have Hannah share her experience in deploying green stormwater infrastructure for climate resilience. And lastly, we'll hear from Dr. Benjamin about the important public health equity benefits of GSI. And after our panelists present, we'll open it up to Q&A. There are two ways you can submit your questions or share your experience. The first option is by using the Q&A button here. There we go. Slide too many. Here we go. The first option is to use the Q&A button here, and you can have our team read your question out loud to the panelists. Or if you'd like to ask your question out loud, you can raise your hand by clicking on the raise hand button. And when it's your turn to speak, we'll send you a message that looks like the one on the left here, which will allow you to unmute yourself and say your question or comment out loud. Okay, we'll be asking a few polling questions throughout the presentation. So in a second, you'll see a poll pop up on your screen. So the question is your community currently using localized distributed infrastructure solutions to address water supply, water quality, stormwater, or wastewater challenges? Yes, we've invested extensively in a localized infrastructure program. We have a few programs. No, we haven't invested in these programs, or I don't know. We'll give you just a few moments here to respond. Okay, and we'll share the results. Great, so it sounds like we're really all across the board on this. Some folks have invested extensively, and it looks like the majority have a few programs, and maybe I know you're participating today to learn about how to implement some more of these types of programs. Okay, so for those viewers who aren't familiar with our organization, WaterNow Alliance is a nonprofit network of local water decision makers supporting sustainable, affordable, and climate resilient water solutions across the One Water spectrum. Sustainable is sort of a catch-all term, so we define it as providing safe, healthy, and affordable water services for people while preserving the integrity of water resources and the environment for future generations. And our work falls into a few different categories. We advocate for policies at the state and federal level that creates pathways for sustainable and affordable strategies. We engage our members and connect them with innovative ideas, resources, and opportunities. and we demonstrate success by providing technical assistance to implement projects on the ground. So WaterNow launched our Tap into Resilience initiative to support cities and utilities to accelerate their investment in all kinds of localized, on-site, distributed water strategies. These options are today's untapped resources for addressing our drinking water, stormwater, wastewater, and other water management challenges. Distributed infrastructure is decentralized water management strategies spread out over many properties. It's typically not owned or operated by your city or water agency. It operates in concert with built infrastructure, and it's paid for or incentivized by the utility. Localized strategies include a broad range of options. Some examples include green stormwater infrastructure, which we'll be talking more about today, such as bioswales, permeable pavement, and green roofs. Can also include water efficiency strategies like turf replacement, leak detection devices, and high efficiency appliances and fixtures, and water quality programs like lead service line replacements. But are these strategies infrastructure? Increasingly, what we're hearing and seeing is that they are. And the reason is that decentralized on-site systems can serve the same functions as traditional water infrastructure by improving the reliability of our water supply, managing our stormwater runoff, and improving our water quality. They represent long-term investments in our system's functionality and resilience. And there's important benefits associated with expanding our water infrastructure portfolios to include localized infrastructure, some of which we'll be hearing more about today. They're typically less expensive and less time intensive to implement than building centralized water infrastructure. They can restore and enhance watershed and ecosystem functions to support water supply resilience and health. And they provide multiple benefits for communities and ratepayers like public parks and green space. Tap into Resilience is at its heart focused on broadening the definition of water infrastructure. So while a growing number of utilities are implementing localized infrastructure projects, for the most part, these projects are small and they're not developed at a scale where we're seeing significant advancements to our water systems. So we developed the Tap into Resilience Toolkit to serve as an online portal to everything water managers need to scale decentralized water infrastructure all in one place. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Caroline, WaterNow's Policy Director, who will walk us through the toolkit. Oh, Caroline, I think you're still muted.
Thanks, Lindsay, for that introduction to Tap into Resilience. And as Lindsay mentioned, I'll be talking about a critical part of the campaign, the TiR toolkit. So you can see how the toolkit works. We're going to do a live walkthrough. But before we do that, I want to just talk about some of the information that's included in the toolkit so you can get an idea and put this all into context before we dive in. So the toolkit includes 6 main categories of information, which are shown here: the online modules, success stories, downloads, videos, resource library, and what we call the Ask an Expert feature. So I'm going to cover a summary of each of these categories, but before we do that, let's have another quick survey of the group, which you'll see pop up on your screen. And so how familiar are you with the TiR toolkit? And don't worry, all of the answers will be anonymous, so you can be honest and say you haven't seen it yet. So I'll give folks a few minutes to respond. Moments, rather. Okay, and so let's see the results. And it looks like almost everyone has not seen it yet, which is great. That's why we're doing these walkthroughs, so everyone can see how this resource works. So the toolkit itself is made up into two main online modules. The first that cover a wide variety of topic areas, including finance, tax, accounting, and legal how-tos, how to motivate your ratepayers to deploy localized strategies on their property, as well as steps to securing the long-term benefits of these distributed strategies. Generally, the toolkit is made up of two main modules, the first of which is what are my financing options, that covers utility costs and revenue sources, debting localized infrastructure, and accessing state, federal, and philanthropic funding. The second is how to implement localized strategies on public property not owned by the utility, as well as private property. So the toolkit also includes a set of case studies that serve as real-world success stories of communities already using localized infrastructure to meet their drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater management challenges. And you'll be hearing about some of these examples from our guest speakers in a few minutes. And to provide practical resources, the toolkit also includes example ordinances, operation and maintenance agreements, as well as a bond council opinion and conservation easements that each have contextualizing summaries that can be easily downloaded from the toolkit. And to help water leaders understand more complex topics around building more effective distributed programs, the toolkit also includes short explanatory videos that covers things like how to debt finance localized infrastructure, what environmental impact bonds are and where they've been used before, stormwater credit trading programs, as well as why it's important to engage with your customers on social media channels. Next, the toolkit, all resource library, serves as a quick way to access all of the toolkit resources, as well as additional reports and information about localized infrastructure strategies. So last but not least, as a distinctive part of the toolkit, we've compiled a panel of experts to answer community-specific questions about implementation of localized infrastructure in your community. And you can connect with these experts through the Ask an Expert form, which is this online portal, and they stand ready to provide pro bono assistance for folks that are interested in asking their specific questions. And I really do encourage everyone to take advantage of this resource. So how does a toolkit work? The online interface makes accessing all of the resources as easy as clicking through the modules or searching the resource library. But to give you a better sense of what that means in practice, I'm going to switch over to the live website view here. So there are two ways to access the toolkit. If you're already on the TiR website, as I am here, you'd go to Start Implementing and click Tap into Resilience Toolkit. This takes you to the welcome page and overview of the program, of the toolkit. But because we've already done that, I'll go ahead and just click on the link. And so this would take you to the direct landing page for the toolkit, which you could type in from this link, tapin.waternow.org/toolkit. So now that I'm on the landing page, I'm ready to get started. So I'll click on that, and reading the welcome message, I see that this is where I can access the two toolkit modules, as well as the toolkit reference library and the Ask an Expert form. So because the toolkit does include quite a bit of information, for today we'll just cover how to access two of the sections, which is how to debt finance localized infrastructure and examples of equity-focused localized infrastructure programs. So to get to the debt financing sections, I'll click on what are my financing options, which takes me to that section of the toolkit. And because I'm interested in the debt piece, I'll click on that. This takes me to the debt financing section of this toolkit module. And I see that there's an overview of what's included. Again, access to the Ask an Expert feature, as well as 4 additional sublayers. So for today, to use an example of how a water leader might use this section of the toolkit, let's say I'm a city councilor from a town in Pennsylvania with a population of about 500,000, whose CFO has shared with them that given accounting rules, it's not possible to debt finance our private property green infrastructure grant program that provides funding for homeowners to install rain gardens on their property. As a city councilor, I'm interested in growing and expanding this program. So I'm curious whether something might have changed since my CFO formed her understanding of the accounting rules. So looking at the options here, I see that there's a section for answering accounting questions. So I'll click on that. And I now see that there are 2 additional sublayers, and I want to learn how to debt finance my grant program, so I'll click on that. This takes me to an overview of how to debt finance localized infrastructure, and I see that there was a change in 2018 to clarify that consumer incentive programs can indeed be debt financed, a primer for water leaders on how to take this approach, an explanatory video from one of our expert panelists, examples from 3 communities who are in this approach. Again, access to the Ask an Expert portal in case I have a specific question I'd like to pose, and links out to additional resources in the library. So I'm most interested in the primer for now, so I'll go back up and click on that link, which takes me to a separate portion of the toolkit in the library specific for this resource. So I can read the overview here, but if I wanted to download this primer and share it with my CFO, I could do so by filling out this short form. And since I'm a city councilor, I would choose to become a WaterNow member, and then I could download the document from there. So back in the toolkit, I seem to remember that there was a link to the implementation page as well. So I'm going to click on that because I'm interested in making sure that everyone in my community can indeed access this grant program. So I'm now in the second module of the toolkit for implementation strategies. And because my program is for private property, I'll click on that. This takes me into an overview of this section, as well as 4 additional sublayers. And because my community relies on green stormwater infrastructure to meet our stormwater management challenges, but we do face some challenges on accessing all neighborhoods for the grant program, especially those who have been disproportionately impacted by combined sewer overflows in the older portions of our city. I'm going to click on addressing equity challenges, which brings this section of the toolkit. And I can see here that there's examples of other communities who have taken an equity-focused approach. And so I can click on that and see that there's several examples here from Atlanta, Tucson, Philadelphia, and some others on how they've addressed their equity challenges that I might learn from, as well as links to the toolkit resource library. So that'll cover it for just 2 of the sections of the toolkit. And you can access the others in this same approach. And I'll note too that we view the toolkit as a living, growing document as we identify new case studies and add new materials, as well as based on feedback from toolkit users. So to provide your feedback, you can do that through the TiR website under Start Implementing and Feedback. This will take you to two forms. One, to share your localized infrastructure story with WaterNow as a potential case study, and the other to provide your feedback on your experience in using the toolkit, and let us know if you'd like to see additional resources or additional ways to access the materials. And I really do, again, encourage everyone to take this opportunity to participate in the TiR initiative. So before I turn it over to Hannah to talk about green infrastructure examples to deploy in the climate context, I will take us back to the PowerPoint and we'll have another quick poll. So after seeing the toolkit demo that we just done, you have a better understanding of the toolkit as a resource for your utility. True, somewhat true, neutral, somewhat false, or false. And we'll give a few moments to respond. All right, let's see how we've done here. All right, well, it seems that walkthrough was useful, so we appreciate that. And again, I invite everyone to take a look at the website and provide any additional feedback that you'd like to share with us. And so that brings us to Hannah, who I will turn it over to.
All right, hello everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Hannah Grooms and I am an engineer for Greenprint Partners. And today I'm going to talk about how stormwater challenges are affecting cities, the solution of green stormwater infrastructure and the benefits it can provide, and end with a case study called Catholic Charities, which is a project we're working on right now. Stormwater management is one of the greatest challenges our cities are facing today. When I use the term stormwater management, I'm simply referring to water that originated as rainwater or snowmelt. Why is this such a problem? The main problem with stormwater is when there is too much of it. Excess stormwater going into our sewer systems, combined with sanitary flow that is already in our sewer systems, can lead to combined sewer overflow. Most of these overflows occur in our rivers, lakes, and streams. This results in untreated wastewater entering into our waterways, which can deteriorate the water quality. Additionally, urban flooding can occur when there's too much stormwater. Urban flooding can flood our streets and sidewalks, and it can result in basement backups. Low-income residents are disproportionately affected by this urban flooding because their neighborhoods are more likely to be sited in flood-prone areas, and they are less likely to have the infrastructural and economical support systems in place to help with stormwater damage. Unfortunately, this problem is just continuing to get worse. Our sewer systems are aging. Most cities are dealing with sewer systems that are in need of expensive repair and/or replacement. And on top of that, our cities are growing. Over 75% of the US population currently lives in cities. This means more and more people are putting strain on our sewer system by using their toilets, showering, doing laundry, and increasing the flow into the systems that we have. Additionally, growing cities mean we're paving more. What used to be rural grassland where water could fall and soak into the soil is now being paved over with hard surfaces, such as parking lots, streets, and rooftops. This water does not follow its natural course and instead is directed into these aging stormwater systems. Finally, worsening weather patterns show that there may be an increase in the amount of intensified storm events coming up, which could overburden our current stormwater systems. But that's enough doom and gloom slides. On to the happy ones. One possible solution to all these problems is green stormwater infrastructure. Simply put, green stormwater infrastructure is the use of natural systems, such as plants and soil, to manage water right where it falls. Let's look at an example of how this works. Green stormwater infrastructure can come in a variety of types, as we saw in Lindsay's slide, with permeable pavements, green roofs, tree trenches, or rain gardens. Today we'll take a look at a rain garden. During dry weather, a rain garden looks and functions just like a normal garden. But when it starts to rain, that's when we get to see a rain garden in action. Rain can fall onto the trees, plants, and shrubs, and it is then uptaken into their root system. As it continues to rain, it can soak into the soil layer below. This is a distinct difference between urban and rural land. When water can soak into the soil, it can be held there. But think about your driveway. If water falls onto that, it flows into the street and then into an inlet directly into a sewer system, which is different than a rain garden. Underneath the soil layer can be sand and gravel layers. These layers act for two purposes. One, they can filter out pollutants. So as your water's running and picking up any oil or trash or residue, the sand and gravel layers can help filter out these pollutants. Additionally, they can hold water in their pores. This reduces the volume of water going into our sewer system. In an ideal case, these rain gardens would be built in land where the water can continue to soak into the ground, possibly recharging our water tables. But some land is very high in clay, in which case we need to add a perforated drain pipe. This drain pipe allows the cleaned water that has been filtered through sand and gravel to exit slowly back into the existing sewer system. During a heavy rainwater event, when there's too much water for our rain garden to hold, we include an overflow pipe. The overflow pipe is like the emergency exit for the water. As water gets too high, rather than flooding the surrounding area, it can go down through the overflow pipe and into the existing sewer system. These are the stormwater management benefits of green stormwater infrastructure in terms of both quantity and quality. But the most exciting thing about green stormwater infrastructure is there are a whole host of additional benefits. These range from community level benefits, such as beautifying a neighborhood so people have more pride and cohesion, or creating jobs in order to maintain these green stormwater infrastructure, to environmental, ecological benefits. The water quality we discussed by reducing combined sewer overflows, but there are also great air quality benefits, such as reduction of greenhouse gases due to the plants. The plants and wildlife also form habitat and increase biodiversity, possibly attracting pollinators or birds. And all of the additional vegetation can have a reducing effect on the urban heat island effect many cities are facing. Finally, human health. The individual can be helped by the benefits of green stormwater infrastructure with their mental health, their physical health, and respiratory health as the plants are able to clean out pollutants in the air. These technical stormwater management systems, along with the host of additional benefits, are what Greenprint partners are excited to help property owners build high-impact, community-driven green stormwater infrastructure. We manage the process from start to finish by partnering with private landowners and helping them manage both the application for grants and the funding cycle. We also manage the design and construction of the projects, and we engage the community throughout the entire process. This community engagement is a key part of our process. We refer to it as benefits-driven design. We believe that having local community voices involved in our projects will make them both more successful and have a higher impact on the communities that they are going into. We have discussions with community members through surveys as well as workshops. And we also have meetings throughout the entire design process with key decision makers as well as stakeholders to make sure that the designs that we are working on match the vision that they have for their site. So let's take a look at an example where we used benefits-driven design to influence our green stormwater infrastructure work. Today I'll talk about Catholic Charities. They have a center in St. Louis, Missouri that provides both medical and social services to women who have substance abuse disorders. They also provide affordable senior housing. The construction at this site was made possible by the St. Louis Metropolitan Sewer District. They came up with a stormwater control plan and allocated a section of their fundings for private property owners. This allowed them to address some of the environmental justice disparities in their city. When talking to the Catholic Charities representatives, 3 key priorities were surfaced. The first was they were interested in pride and beautification of their site. Second, they were looking to have improved mental health for their at-risk residents. And third, they wanted to make sure their community stayed safe. So how did we incorporate these 3 key benefits into our design? On the far left, you can see a design plan. In green squares, I've outlined the rain gardens that have gone into this design. You can see they're distributed around the property. These rain gardens will feature highly vegetative, beautiful practices in order to beautify the site with landscape features. Improving mental health. Researchers have shown that interacting with nature and seeing nature can reduce stress level. This encouraged us to use highly visible vegetative practices so that the residents, while wandering around the facility, are able to interact with nature constantly. Finally, safety. Increased incidences of loitering-based crime were reported around the Catholic Charities neighborhood. So when doing our landscape designs, we took this into account and made sure that none of our rain gardens blocked views so that there were no places loitering could occur without being seen. In the middle, you'll see our rain garden in progress. I'd like to show you a picture of our rain garden finished on the right, but it became winter and we couldn't plant our plants. So on the right is an example of a finished rain garden. You'll see here the water ponding inside the rain garden instead of on the street, where it's seeping slowly back into the soil as a natural system. You'll also see that it's a beautiful landscape feature and increasing biodiversity and habitat in the area. When talking to the Catholic Charities representatives, they also had some practical site constraints. They needed parking. Aware that paving over places for driveways could increase the capacity issues in the sewers in their neighborhood, we recommended that they look at permeable pavers. Permeable pavement is another form of green stormwater infrastructure. While it doesn't have the vegetative green features visible on the surface, it does still provide all of the water quality and quantity benefits that we're looking for out of green stormwater infrastructure. It allows the water to seep through the cracks between the pavers into the ground and into a gravel storage area. The entirety of the Catholic Charities project cost about $670,000 and manages about 3.6 acres of land. It also is estimated that over the course of a year, it will manage about 570,000 gallons. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions at the end.
Great, thanks so much, Hannah, for that wonderful presentation. And that's a great reminder that all of our attendees can go ahead and submit their questions throughout the presentation using the Q&A button, or you can wait until the end and raise your hand to ask your question out loud. Now I'd like to...
I think it's automatically going forward. I don't know if there's a way to turn off the slides advance automatically.
Yeah, we should be able to change that. Thank you. So I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Benjamin, who will be making the connection for us between these GSI projects and our public health and well-being.
Hello, folks. How are you? I get the slides working here. There we go. So I want to just talk a little bit about climate change and heat, and just recognizing that obviously the climate change has enormous impact on human health, from air pollution to changes in the infectious disease in the community, more allergens, significant impacts on water quality, food, environmental degradation overall, severe weather, and of course, hot. gets very hot. And all of these things have a significant impact on human health in a variety of ways. Today, I want to focus a little bit on health and heat. One of the things we also know is that the climate burden is not shared equally. So there are certain climate sensitive populations that we have. These populations have limited resources to adapt to climate change and disproportionately suffer the greatest impact. And obviously the extremes of age, the very old and the very young, some minority communities for sure. And the vulnerability these communities have really depends very much on community resilience. And when I talk about that, I talk about all of those societal factors that influence health. So those include, high quality schools, jobs, healthy housing, safe communities, the green space that's available, access to healthcare, public transportation, the communities themselves in terms of things like social cohesion and the social capital in those communities. Far too many of these communities are places where you get toxic exposures. They're right next to expressways. They're around power plants that are spewing pollution in the air. And in many ways, the way these communities are often built, particularly the older inner city communities, which play a big role in what I'm talking about. So we know that the built environment itself influences temperature. We know that dark urban surfaces absorb the heat rather than reflect most of the sun. That results in heating the city and increasing air pollution. They also often lack vegetation and trees to absorb heat, which also reduces pollution and provides shade to communities. And in many of our urban settings in particular, these dark surfaces make the cities about 9 degrees warmer on average. But you see more of this in lower income communities because they often have less vegetation and often more dark surfaces. The solution to these communities is often just to pave the roads over or put in lots of dark structures. We know that as our cities are getting hotter, this is particularly happening in some of our lower income areas. So this is a study by Portland State University where they looked at Richmond, Virginia, and showed that some of the lower income areas around the area called Oak Grove and the Fan District saw temperatures as high as 100 degrees Fahrenheit, where the higher income areas were as much as 12 degrees Fahrenheit cooler for a variety of reasons. And of course, they attribute that to the infrastructure of those communities. In 2018, Baltimore City had a heat wave after 103 degrees Fahrenheit. In that city, they had lots of emergency medical services call for, a range of health disorders. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease is what, of course, you get when you have lung disease, particularly smokers. It went up around 70%, as well as a range of other respiratory conditions. More people had heart disease with cardiac arrest. They found more high blood pressure and a range of other issues, psychiatric diseases, substance abuse, and people with dehydration also were often picked up by the ambulance service in the city. There seemed to be, looking at Medicaid, and Medicaid's a good model to look at because you can actually track hospitalizations for Medicaid, and looking at the fact that in this area that you had more hospital visits and that even outpatient visits, some of the lower income patients who were in zip codes where there were more hotspots had more doctor visits for asthma, COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and heart disease. So I'm just going to show you a map of Baltimore City that year. And on the right, you have a higher income community. And you can see I circled in red this community. And then on the left, you can see that there's more there's hotter in that community that's circled there than on the cooler community on the right. So it seems to also be this case in Baltimore City, and this is another study that was done looking at heat and the correlation between heat and urban cities, as well as heat and wealth. So we know that those communities tend, again, to have less trees, more darker impervious surfaces that are hotter, that in addition, their energy costs tend to be higher. Of course, that means that they have to run, if they have air conditioning, they have to run more air conditioning, so they have a greater financial burden for that. Transportation costs for these communities tend to take up a larger amount of their budget. And obviously, the more older and younger folks you have in a community, the more that community, particularly that community, is vulnerable to the heat. And if you just follow these graphs along, it just shows you that obviously more heat, greater pollution, more heat-related issues, and ultimately more deaths from heat. So it's important to think about this continuum of environmental change, which resulted in things like heat waves, and then the health impact of that. And the question is, what are some of the kinds of things that one can do about that? So smart surfaces is an interesting new strategy, an integrated strategy. One thinks we can address some of the climate change related to heat. Obviously, when the sunlight hits a dark roof, it absorbs it. When it hits a light roof, it reflects it off. And so the goal is to try to address that in a variety of ways. We know that smart surfaces can cut carbon dioxide equivalent emissions by 10 to 15% if you put in lighter surfaces, if you address roofs, streets, parking lots. Also look at reducing fossil fuel use, obviously it makes sense, and putting in more on wind and solar. And they have the effect of trying to reduce the heat overall and reducing costs and electricity use. And this is just to give you a sense of some of what those surfaces are. Obviously, reflective roofs, which are light colored, again, reflect the heat and the light. And ultimately, they slow global warming. Having green roofs, which provide shading, they also can absorb and clean the water, as you saw earlier in the earlier presentation. Porous pavements, again, because they can help manage runoff and flood risks, but also doing them with light surfaces. Using solar, which can convert sunshine electricity. Also, in addition to being a great for reducing our energy utilization, there are actually solar walkways that one can do. Obviously putting more trees in because they ultimately give you the shade and sequester carbon and ultimately can reduce the evaporation of water. And then putting these combined systems in where you have solar both on roofs and on the roads and porous substances. Putting these things together makes a big difference in some of these communities. And this is just an example of all these surfaces, the roads being dark. If you can increase the reflectivity and add trays, making the parking lanes, again, more pervious, using pervious substances. Same thing with the parking lot. And then on the roofs, adding solar to the roofs, making the roofs much lighter, and adding bioswale, which also can help manage water by absorbing the rain runoff. So in summary, smart services can give you cooler, healthier communities by smart design. They're much more efficient. They reduce the risk of heat-related injury, and in particular, when you start talking about doing this in urban settings, particularly where these urban settings have lower income communities where people have more climate sensitivity, you can get really a two-for. You get the co-benefit of the health benefit by reducing the heat in the community and really improving the overall water management in that community as part of that process. So just in closing, just the American Public Health Association is the nation's nonprofit. We've been around for over almost 150 years, and we are a nonprofit that's a community asset. So that I'll stop and turn it over to the next speaker.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Benjamin, for that insightful presentation. And thanks also to Hannah and Caroline. Now we'd like to turn it over to our audience for Q&A. And as a reminder, you can either submit your questions via the Q&A box, or you can raise your hand to ask your question out loud to our panelists. So the first question that we received here, and I'm going to start off with Hannah on this one, and then Caroline and Dr. Benjamin, please feel free to jump in. The question is, how are specific quantifiable stormwater benefits being measured and tracked? Environmental and social and health related benefits. How do most systems plan on sharing the aforementioned data with the community and investors?
What a great question. These systems really are only useful if we can prove that they're working and providing all of these benefits. So I think that's such an important piece of data that needs to be collected. Right now, I wouldn't say that there is a standardized method for recording each rain garden's benefits or different types of green stormwater infrastructure, but there are a variety of quantifiable benefits. Cities can track the water quality of their rivers, streams, and lakes, as well as the number of combined sewer overflows they're having to see if there is a decrease after installing distributed infrastructure. In terms of environmental, there is air quality testing that can be done or may already be in place, constant screening for different reasons. And also for social and health, that's something that we're working on at Greenprint Partners, is trying to determine how to quantify these health benefits that we see as key benefits of green stormwater infrastructure in order to see if investors might be more interested in the health benefits than the stormwater benefits, depending on what their background is.
Great, thank you.
I can certainly add that obviously there's a lot of data tracking around health. Every year the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation actually looks at the health of communities by zip code, by counties. And we're now trying to get it to the zip code level so that people can really correlate societal change, the built environment, things like more transportation, so that you'll actually be able to say, okay, I did this in the community, and what is the health impact? Now you got to be prepared to look at it over several years, but if you do these things in a deliberate manner, you should be able to see the health benefit and then capture that in terms of an economic savings and then reinvest that in the community in whatever ways you choose to do so.
Caroline, anything to add to those comments? Oh, I think you're muted.
I was just saying, I think those are all great examples of the metrics. And to check out the other ways people have measured those kind of things, I will just direct everybody to the case studies on the toolkit page to see other examples.
Excellent. So our next question is directed at Dr. Benjamin. It comes from Bobby Cotran with Willamette Partnerships, and he's asking, thinking of water utilities as part of your public health workforce, which I love that concept. What would the top 3 things be we could argue for in federal stimulus to improve health equity?
I think the first one on top of my list would be to change all the lead water lines going in and out of our homes, particularly in our urban settings. We saw this challenge in Flint, Michigan, with the old infrastructure, and every city in this country is going to have that as a challenge. So I think that's the top thing for me. And then I think thinking about how we build communities smarter, so that we begin to build with lots of urban planning, so that we build on the existing infrastructure and stop urban sprawl would be important, so that from a policy perspective, putting in limits on where you can build so that we are primarily, building in a smart way on top of the existing infrastructure. And then requiring as part of that infrastructure, as a third part of that infrastructure be built smart, so that you use smart surfaces, that you think about urban design in a way so that you're looking at cooling cities. Now, the secret to doing that is not just to put the plans on the table and spend the money. You really need to do the right economic analysis and then capture that savings, because one of the problems we have with all of our sectors is the wrong pocket issue. The person who often does the investment doesn't always achieve all of the savings. That savings may go to somebody else. And so we underestimate what the benefit of an intervention is. So to the extent that we can capture that savings across all those sectors, get the full cost of what those interventions are, and then we can fight over who gets the money later. The important thing is we always have a much bigger bang for our buck when we do these kinds of things.
Right, absolutely. Thank you. The next question is directed to Caroline. How does WaterNow Alliance bridge the gap between utility practitioners, municipalities, and investors who are specifically interested in sustainability and equity?
So part of the Tap into Resilience initiative is to work directly with utilities and cities who are interested in scaling their investments in these types of solutions. And as Dr. Benjamin said, to capture the full benefit and costs of these types of strategies. So we are looking to provide, and we're working with communities for pro bono support of 150 hours to help you navigate the challenges that you're facing in connecting with those types of investors or accessing other debt financing sources. And we also have a broad range of partners that we're working with, like Greenprint, who have this benefits-driven approach, as well as Quantified Ventures, who is an environmental impact bond facilitator. And so those projects will have access to those resources as well. And if you're interested in becoming a project, feel free to reach out to me.
Great, thank you, Caroline. Our next question is for all of our panelists, and maybe I'll pass this one over to Hannah to respond first. Do you think that COVID-19 might accelerate or burden our efforts to address stormwater runoff and climate change? How are funding sources affected as resources are directed to community aid versus infrastructure?
Great question. I think some of the green stormwater infrastructure programs may be affected differently, but a lot of times during a crisis like this, a lot of money is poured into infrastructure investments because it's an easier way to kickstart the economy. And we've seen that a lot of the markets that we're working in are actually able to do construction work in a socially distanced manner. So it hasn't been as negatively impacted by COVID-19 as you may have thought.
Yeah, I would add that money's not our problem. Not at the federal level. It is a big problem at the local level. But one of the ways they can give investments into local communities is public work projects, and giving the dollars to state and local governments for them to rebuild the infrastructure. And it's roads, it's bridges, it's transportation. It'll put a lot of people back to work very, very, very quickly. And my only argument is let's do it in a safe manner, and let's do it in a way that benefits society overall versus just building something to build it. So it does require a little bit of planning, but there's a whole lot of shovel-ready projects sitting right on the shelf right now. So they can get a lot of people back to work quickly and reinvigorate the economy, I would think.
And the only other thing I'll add to that is the examples that we've been able to compile so far, the jobs created directly through localized programs where you're investing in green infrastructure as well as efficiency and conservation programs result in local jobs, oftentimes quicker, and do create ongoing permanent operation and maintenance jobs that are not always there once the deep tunnel is built. Then it's under the ground, it just operates, and certainly needs operation and maintenance, but not in the same way that green infrastructure that we've been talking about does. So prioritizing investments in these kind of multiple benefit approaches, I think is an important thing to think about as we're looking to our recovery following the COVID crisis.
Great, thank you so much for that thoughtful response, everyone. We're running up on the end of our time here, and we want to be respectful of everyone's schedules. There are some other excellent questions that you've all submitted, and we're going to be sure to get these to the appropriate panelists to respond to following this webinar. So if we weren't able to answer your question live, we will be in touch with you. And just a couple of rounding out logistical items. Caroline, if you'd like to pull our screen back up. In just a moment in the chat box, you'll see an evaluation form, the link to that form. So we thank you in advance for taking just a minute to complete our evaluation. And next slide. If you're interested in learning more about Tap into Resilience and accessing the toolkit, we've got the link here. It can be accessed at tapin.waternow.org. And again, we're certainly looking for your feedback and input on that resource. And lastly, if you're not already a WaterNow member, please sign up to become a member at waternow.org/join-the-leaders. Joining the Alliance is free, and you'll have access to our members-only resources and information. And with that, we'd like to thank all of our attendees and panelists for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. We hope you all have a great day.